afternoon. The July 21st meeting of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust to be in order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the July 7th meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes July 7th. Are there comments or questions? Hearing none, voting please. Minutes are approved. Next item is a consent docket.
Move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket subject to individual consideration or matters.
Mr. Chairman, well, of course, sorry to interrupt the process. We do have a presentation for you about item number, about consent item number D, 3D, the amendment to the contract for engineering services for the system engineer. Larry Harris, our project manager, and he's going to describe to you what we've agreed to do, and then we'll talk about the next steps for this very large project.
Thank you, Marcia. I'm flying blind at the moment. As soon as the screen comes down, I can probably scroll through the slides. Hang with us here just a second. All right. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to talk to you about the Second Atoka Pipeline, where we are in this amendment. Some points of discussion that we're going to talk about, of course, is just a review of what the current system looks like. We retained CDM Smith. I wanted to do a brief overview of what the Southeast Supply Plan came up with. I also want to discuss a little bit about what the amendment contains that our system engineer will be embarking upon. And as Marcia mentioned earlier, the next steps to be taken as far as the design of the second pipeline goes. On the current system, what we have here is a picture of the Atoka Dam being constructed in the late 1950s. The current system consists of a 100-mile-long concrete pipeline, 60 inches in diameter, that stretches from Atoka to Draper, that brings water through 6 pump stations. It was built and operational in the early 1960s. In the 1980s, we also built McGee Creek Reservoir and pump station and about a little over 17 miles of pipeline that's made of steel of 66-inch and 72-inch, bringing water from McGee Creek to Atoka and then transferred up to Lake Draper. On the Southeast Supply Plan, we retained the services of CDM Smith to see how we can bring more water from the Southeast Oklahoma, and entitled it the Southeast Supply Plan. It was built upon 2 previous studies that we did in the past, one being the 2003 Water Master Plan by Montgomery Watson Harza, the other being the 2009 Regional Raw Water Supply Study, also done by CDM Smith. The supply plan that CDM Smith did, that we approved in October of last year, also confirmed the thing that both studies talked about, was the need for a second Atoka pipeline by the year 2021. And inside, it also determined the full build-out of the entire system by the year 2060, which will include 3 66-inch pipelines along the Atoka corridor, a phased implementation plan, as well as a diversion point off the Kiamichi River to bring water from that basin. As a brief item of description, here's what the current system looks like at full 2060 build-out. It will look like this, with 3 parallel pipelines from Atoka to Draper, pump stations along the way. We'll also have new pump stations at Moyers and at McGee Creek to transfer water from the Kiamichi Basin through a new 72-inch pipeline. So how do we get there? Well, the first step is to build the second Atoka pipeline, which is going to be a 66-inch line, and 3 new pump stations at Atoka, Stonewall, and at Kanawha. So on this next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the key tasks that are included in this amendment that y'all are considering today for amendment number 4. One thing is a full design-ready topographic survey that will be done along the entire pipeline corridor, which will then be handed off to other consultants for their design on differing sections along the pipeline. They will also be doing a more intense operational hydraulic modeling sessions other than what was performed during the supply plan, because that was more of a conceptual nature. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the design. From those modeling sessions, we'll also have them prepare a design manual as well as design standards that will be common to pretty much every pipeline job for design consultants to work off of. They're also going to evaluate options on how to pre-purchase the pipe and whether we should be doing it all at one time per section, and also coming up with construction sequencing along the pipeline as well as construction size packaging. And from this effort, they will be doing the pump station design for the new pump stations at Atoka, Stonewall, and at Kanawha. Following that, and during the course of their work, we will be endeavoring to hire design engineers. We have 7 sections of pipeline with which to solicit separate design engineers with, as well as the Canadian River crossing, for a total of 8 design engineering consultant contracts. And that's just a brief explanation of what is going on today, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
So it's the first step. The next steps include solicitations for the engineers who will do the detailed design work. We're talking about, I wanted to go over a couple of things. We're talking about hiring 8 firms, but the number of construction projects each of those individual design contracts will develop is yet unknown. We're thinking it could be 5. It could be we want to get into it more and have a better understanding what the cost per project will be before we break up the into the final construction bids. The surveying has to get so it's going to be very much a phased process. We'll be able to put design engineers to work, we think, roughly as the first surveying gets completed.
Correct.
But that's not immediate. We hope that by the time we've completed the solicitations and developed the contract for professional services and taken those through the process, that we'll have surveying for someone to start. The critical path includes a 65% design completion requirement for all of the projects before we can pre-select the pipe materials. The plan includes our purchase of the pipe materials. CDM will spend a good amount of time developing that information in some detail. We believe buying the pipe will be helpful in making certain that we can have local contractors be able to bid the work given the size of the project. It helps improve their bonding capacity, if you will. We're excited about having that opportunity to do it. It's very different for us, so we're going into that pretty cautiously. Construction in late 2017. Miles to go before it's almost 2 years before we actually get to construction. Perhaps earlier if things can move forward a little earlier.
There's a lot of moving parts before anything like that.
It's fascinating work. There are a lot of moving parts. That's exactly right.
By breaking this up, after this is completed, by breaking it up into 8 contracts, does that follow along with what I've talked about earlier about making those contracts available to local engineering people?
Yes, sir.
They'll be small enough to do that with. Is that right?
Yeah.
Manageable for local people.
Yes, it's a big contract
Right.
for local firms.
You met with the local contractors to talk about what their capabilities are, their bonding capacity, and what reasonable size projects would be, correct?
Yes, and that's it.
You're trying to accommodate that?
Yes, there are. The design, looking at the total number of firms that we think we can hire for design and managing those projects well, we broke it up by segments between the pump stations, with a separate one for the separate project for the river crossing. For construction, really have not decided yet. Want to again look at what.
Right, you haven't cut those up, but you're aware of the concerns, and you have that goal in mind.
Absolutely. The fact that we're hiring one design engineer doesn't mean that's one construction project. I'll be clear about that.
I had a couple of other questions that came up just while I thought of while you were making your presentation. One of them has to do with the fact that I did not realize we were going to do storage at 3 of the, what does that mean, we're going to do storage? Does that mean a silo? Does it mean, what, in going through that slide thing, what the word storage was used with regard to 3 of the pump stations?
Yeah, storage, I think, is the wrong terminology there. It's more of the balancing tank. It's, the current system has a 5 million gallon tank at each pump station site, which gives the a range of operation for the pump station to work with instead of pumping directly to the station itself.
It's not water storage for, in the sense that we're storing it for.
No, sir.
Okay. The other one had to do with the right-of-way. You know, we've had some conversations in the past about some of the difficulties of acquiring the right-of-way. Where are we in that regard?
So we're working on that with the help of a right-of-way acquisition person, but generally we have the right-of-way for the vast majority of the pipeline. We're going to, if we don't resolve the last easements on one section of the pipeline soon, we'll be truly starting construction there last, potentially.
Okay.
The other part about that, the right-of-way will need some clearing. We don't believe it's huge. We know of 32 places where we're going to have to work, and the survey helps us start that work as well.
For the right-of-way acquisition and the extensions that we're talking about, will that cover the 3rd pipeline? I mean, we're going to be wide enough that we can build the 3rd one in that same right-of-way?
There might be provisions that you need to take to get a little bit wider easement. The idea behind the 3rd pipeline is to remove and replace the existing one currently in service. Mm-hmm. So the subsequent pipelines, the 2nd and the 3rd pipeline, will be designed such they can handle the heavy loading of equipment that may be placed upon it in order to get that existing one removed and replaced. So we may not have to have extra easement.
Right. Well, this seemed to me to make sense if we're thinking about further expansion, that we try to deal with the right-of-way now as opposed to waiting.
We'll look at that issue.
Okay.
We will. Thanks for the feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the the concurrence docket. Did we vote on the other one?
I interrupted you.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. We need to vote. It's approved. Next is a concurrence docket. Just one item on the purchase, regarding the purchase of power generation equipment at Draper. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item 4A. Are there comments or questions? Voting, please. 4A is approved. Next item, we do not need executive session, I understand.
Move we strike.
Have a motion and a second to strike. Item stricken. Next items from trustees. Are the comments from trustees? Hearing none, we go to the general manager's reports.
Just a couple of quick things. I've included 3 reports in your packet. The first is describes what the processes that we'll use for the power generation system, given that it's a grant with funds awarded to the city, a process that will be a little bit different than our normal process for Aqua. Essentially is the lead on the contract. Just a slight difference. I just wanted to point it out to you solely because it's different. So we've also got an informational memo that really covers the things we talked about during Larry's presentation. It's item 7B. And finally, we have a year-end wrap-up of water used and storage. The lakes are all still pretty full. Lake Canton is down by only 2.8 feet, which is very normal again for this time of year. Lakes Atoka and McGee Creek are both still in the flood pool. Atoka's been overflowing since May the 8th and continues today. Sir?
No, just, as is Sardis. By the way, Sardis is in the floodplain.
As is Sardis, it's down a couple of feet from its maximum. But all the lakes in the southeast, as I think many of you know, are being managed carefully to not overload the Red River.
I'm pretty sure in the last 3 decades, the lakes have never been cumulatively all this full.
Yeah, it's remarkable. So we're still getting rain. Lakes are going to continue to stay full. Our maximum pumpage so far this year is 132 million gallons a day. More typically, it would be about 150. In our water treatment report on the second page of item 7C, I need to tell you that we reversed numbers for the daily average. The daily average in 2014 was 103.9. That was also 104. The daily average in the last year was just 98.6, an all-time wet experience and aided by conservation, which is a good thing. Water meter sales were 13% less than the previous fiscal year, which was also an all-time high. Water pumpage numbers are very typical of wet and moderate temperature years, again with a boost from water conservation in a good way. We saw something very similar in 2007 when we had the other wettest year on record in recent memory. So, happy to answer questions about what's going on.
I have a question. On the lake levels, on Canton, the 3 asterisk thing says, Canton storage volumes do not include volumes stored in the inactive pool. Is that always on there?
It has been recently. We're trying to capture what the stored water is that might be available for our use.
Okay. Okay. Any questions or comments? We need a motion to receive the reports.
So moved.
Motion and a second to receive the general manager's report. Voting, please. Reports are received. Are there citizens to be heard? We're adjourned.